Jesus gave one warning most people skip past. He compared the end times to a story you already know, the days of Noah. Most readers picture a boat and two of every animal. Jesus saw something else in this story, a warning about ordinary life turning deadly. By the end of this video, you see what he meant and why the warning fits your life right now. No church background needed, no seminary training required, no Greek or Hebrew necessary. Grab a Bible if you have one nearby, or pull up a Bible app on your phone, and let's walk through this together. Let's set the scene first. Matthew wrote his gospel for Jewish readers who expected a coming Messiah and a restored kingdom. He recorded a private conversation between Jesus and 4 disciples on the Mount of Olives, a quiet hillside east of Jerusalem. Mark's gospel names the 4 men present, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, sitting together away from the crowd. This conversation happened days before the crucifixion, near the closing hours of Jesus' public ministry. The temple sat across the valley, huge and golden, its massive white stones catching the afternoon light. Jesus had shot the disciples minutes earlier, right after they admired the beauty of the temple buildings. He told them the temple would fall stone by stone, nothing left standing on top of another. Naturally, the disciples wanted every detail they were able to get out of him. 2 questions poured out of them. When will the temple fall? And what sign marks your return and the end of the age? Jesus gave a long answer, covering wars, famines, false teachers, and shaking nations. Then he slowed down and pointed back centuries to Noah. This single comparison holds the whole warning. To understand Noah, step back to Genesis, chapter 6. Moses wrote Genesis for the people of Israel, generations after Noah lived, preserving an old story passed down long before Moses put pen to page. By this point in the story, humans had spread across the earth, farming, building cities, and raising families for generations. Noah himself came from a long line named in Genesis 5, son after son, generation after generation, name after generation, name after unfamiliar name. His great-grandfather Methuselah lived longer than anyone else recorded anywhere in Scripture, 969 years by the biblical count. Against this whole crowded family tree, Genesis singles out one man as different. Genesis 6 also drops a strange detail. 120 years of patience God builds into the story, a grace period before judgment finally lands. Genesis 6 opens with a blunt verdict on humanity, delivered without softening or apology. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, spreading further with each passing generation. Every thought and plan in the human heart bent toward evil, and only evil, all day, every day, without pause or exception. Strong words for the opening pages of an entire library of Scripture. The text quickly adds a second detail, equally troubling as the first. The earth grew corrupt and filled with violence, until cruelty stopped shocking anybody, not a stray crime here or there tucked away in some forgotten corner. A world where cruelty became normal and nobody blinked twice at the sight of any of this. Marriage happened, families grew, markets ran, festivals filled the calendar, life carried on in every visible way, while the culture underneath had quietly rotted. Genesis says God grieved ever making humanity in the first place, sorrow reaching all the way into the divine heart. He decided to start completely over and picked one single family to carry the whole future forward. Noah's family, 8 people total, chosen out of the entire population of the earth. God gave Noah a strange job, building a massive wooden ship on dry land for a flood nobody around him had ever seen coming. Genesis records exact measurements. Gopher wood, 3 floors, coated with tar inside and out. Bible scholars estimate the building stretched across decades, an entire lifetime of steady, unglamorous labor. Peter later calls Noah a preacher of righteousness, warning his neighbors patiently the entire time he worked. So picture this scene. One ordinary man, hammering boards for years under an open, cloudless sky, telling everyone rain was finally coming. Nobody outside Noah's own house ever believed a single word of the warning. Centuries later, standing on a quiet hillside, Jesus picked up this exact ancient story. He told his disciples plainly, the days right before the Son of Man returns will look like the days of Noah. Luke records a nearly identical line in his own gospel, so this detail clearly mattered to Jesus, worth repeating in more than one place. In those days before the flood, people were eating meals, drinking wine, marrying partners, and giving their children in marriage, right up to the exact day Noah walked into the ark. Read this line slowly. Nothing on this list sounds evil. eating a meal, planning a wedding. None of these break a single commandment. Then the flood came and swept them all away. Nobody saw the wave coming, though Noah warned them for years. Jesus said the coming of the Son of Man works the same way. Same pattern, different flood. Ordinary life running on autopilot, while the warning goes unheard. Jesus repeats a version of this warning elsewhere, describing a man working quietly in a field and a woman grinding grain at home, side by side with a neighbor. One taken, one left behind, without warning. The point never changes across every version of the story. Regular routines were running exactly as expected the moment everything suddenly changed. Here comes the part most people scroll right past without noticing. Jesus never said the people before the flood were lazy or violent in this specific moment before the rain fell. He said something far simpler. They were busy. Eating dinner, drinking wine, planning weddings, running errands. Normal, everyday, harmless-looking activities, the kind of thing filling any ordinary calendar. The danger was never the activities themselves, not one of them. The danger was distraction, plain and simple. People got so wrapped up in daily routines, they completely missed the biggest event in human history happening right outside their own front door. Picture checking your phone during a fire alarm because the group chat looks interesting. The alarm still means the same thing. Your attention moved somewhere else, and this gap cost everything. Jesus warns believers against this exact trap. Not against work, family, or daily responsibility. Against letting daily life numb your senses to a bigger picture. Here's a second picture, a smoke detector chirping softly in the next room while you finish an episode. The chirp gets easier to ignore every single time you hear this sound, and nothing burns. Comfort makes a terrible alarm clock. Routine feels safe. Right up until the safety runs out. Noah's warning failed to land because the sky looked normal every single morning for decades. A calm sky is no proof of a calm future. Think about scrolling through headlines every morning while a health checkup keeps getting pushed to next month, or refreshing a group chat while a struggling relationship quietly needs real attention. The routine itself feels harmless, right up until the delay turns costly. This single idea forms the base of the whole passage. 3 questions come up again and again about this passage. First question. Does the phrase days of Noah mean Jesus knew the exact date of his return? No. A few verses later, Jesus says plainly, nobody knows the day or the hour. Not even the angels. Only the Father. The point was never a calendar. Countless date predictions across history have already failed, one after another, and Jesus addressed this ahead of time. The point was a pattern of behavior to watch for, not a countdown clock to obsess over. Second question. Does this passage point to a secret, hidden meaning about giants or fallen beings mentioned earlier in Genesis 6? Some readers connect Noah's flood to the Nephilim mentioned a few verses earlier in this chapter. Jesus never mentions the Nephilim in Matthew 24. He focused on one detail only: ordinary people ignoring an obvious warning. Interesting side questions still deserve study, but they sit outside what Jesus taught in this particular passage. Stick with what the text says here rather than chasing a side theory the passage never raises. Third question. Will God send another flood like Noah's flood again? Genesis 9 answers this question directly. God sets a rainbow in the clouds as a lasting promise never to flood the whole earth with water again. Peter later writes the next great judgment arise by fire, not by water, a change in method rather than a change in outcome. Different methods, same underlying lesson, and ordinary daily life will carry on right up until the moment everything suddenly changes for good. Fourth question. Does this passage mean daily life itself is somehow sinful or wrong? Absolutely not, nowhere close. Noah himself worked the land, farmed his fields, and raised a family the entire time he spent building the ark for decades. Jesus never condemns eating, working, or marrying, 3 ordinary building blocks of any normal life. He condemns spiritual sleep hiding behind a busy schedule, a kind of sleep dressed up as productivity. So here's the whole idea in 3 sentences. Before the flood, life looked normal on the surface, while judgment built underneath. Jesus said his return follows the same pattern. Ordinary routines masking something enormous approaching. The warning was never about predicting a date. The warning was about staying spiritually awake while everyone else sleepwalks through daily life. Faith in this passage looks less like panic and more like readiness. Noah kept working, kept building, kept warning, decade after quiet decade. This steady readiness, not a lucky guess, saved his family when the rain finally came. Nobody remembers Noah for guessing correctly. People remember him for staying faithful long before proof ever arrived. Remember the question from the start: why do most Christians miss this warning? Because the warning hides inside boring, everyday moments, not traumatic ones. Noah's neighbors did not miss a spectacle. They missed a pattern hiding in plain sight. Ask yourself where this same pattern shows up around you today. Before next week, read Matthew 24 verses 36 through 39 on your own. Then read Genesis 6 verses 5 through 8 right beside this passage. Ask yourself one honest question in the comments below. What part of your daily routine tends to drown out warnings you already know are true? Everybody watching this has some version of this pattern running quietly in the background. Drop your answer and let's compare notes together. Subscribe for next week when we open Genesis 7 and step inside the ark itself. Noah did not survive the flood because he predicted the date. Noah survived because he stayed ready long before the rain started. Stay ready.